Hello, hello. This video is talking about the very basic structure of D&D combat. There's a lot that can be involved in combat, and even some of the basics can get pretty involved, but this is an attempt to just really break it down to the smallest possible elements for somebody who may be extremely new to the concept of D&D, or who has never really sat down and had somebody explain it to them before. This is just the very introduction portion of that structure. So the first thing that you need to know for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is that on a battle map that looks like this one, each one of these squares is going to be 5 feet. So you'll notice that it's this 5-foot square. If you have trouble with distances and you're trying to comprehend kind of how big 5 feet is-ish, most average humans are between 5 and 6 feet. And most average humans have an arm span about the same as their height. So if you stand on the floor and you stretch out your arms in both directions, you're gonna be pretty approximately filling up that 5-foot space with your arm span. And if you turn in a circle doing that, then that area is gonna be about this size. Which is why in Dungeons & Dragons, medium-sized creatures take up one of these 5-foot squares. Medium-sized creatures are like humans or elves or just anything that's approximately the same size that we are. Halflings are a little smaller. You'll notice this guy right here has a little smaller base and doesn't quite take up this whole square like this guy does. But this guy is a medium-sized creature, and he takes up that one square on a battle map. Halfling takes up part of that square, and then if you have, so halfling is a small creature, humans are medium. If you have a large size creature, the next size up from that would take up this amount of space on a battle map. And again, that's partly just where you're standing, but it's also partly where your arm span is, where your weapons are going to swing, where your stuff is going to be when you have your backpack on. Just all of that kind of stuff takes up this amount of space on a battle map. Space on the battle map is important to understand in terms of a couple of things. One of them is spells range and the range of your ranged weapons, like a bow and arrow. And one of them is for your movement. I'm not going to go into detail about spells right now because this is really just the basics. But the principle of it is, if you have a spell whose range is 30 feet, that means that if you're standing right here and you're trying to cast that spell, you can only cast that spell on something that's within that distance around you. And if it's out of that distance, you have to get closer before you can reach somebody with it. Same thing with a bow and arrow. There's a range that will be written on your character sheet that shows you how far away you can shoot without it, just sort of falling on the ground and not making it quite all the way. The other aspect of range in that regard is your movement, which is the first principle that we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to use this little kobold guy to point at move, so you can remember which one we're talking about. On your D&D turn, everybody gets a movement. Now you'll notice that I marked right here that it says turn and then per round. So these 3 things are things that happen when it's your actual turn to do things. Your turn is just when you are up and you are doing stuff and then you finish. A round is what's called when everybody has had a turn. So when somebody starts, we've gone through everybody, they've all had a turn, that's been 1 round. Now on your turn, everybody gets a movement. You always get a movement unless you have some kind of condition placed upon you. like a spell has been cast or you've been tangled up in vines or something like that. And in those cases, the spell or the condition will always tell you how it affects your movement. So you don't have to memorize that or anything. There's, in fact, on the DnD 5th edition Dungeon Master's screen, there's actually an entire list of conditions and how they affect you. So you really just don't even have to look them up. They're just right there. And you can see right here, for example, there's stunned, restrained, prone. It's just all listed there and how it affects you. So you don't have to do very much to remember how that works. It's pretty convenient. But if you don't have any of those things on you, you always have a movement. An average movement for a character is 30 feet. But again, that will be listed on your character sheet. You don't even have to remember, like, how much it is or how it affects anything. For example, my halfling on this character sheet, my speed is 25. Because halflings are small, they can't move quite as fast as a human, so they're a little bit slower. So my little halfling guy started the same place as the human. He could only go not quite as far. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 could go that far, whereas the human could go to 30. And you always get that movement, like I said, unless there's a condition imposed on you. One of the things that you can do with your movement is you can, if there's a monster that's, let's see, where's my spider? If there's a monster that's, like, charging at you this way and you have 1 hit point left, you can use your movement on your turn to be like, nope, and get out of the way. You can use your movement to close the distance. Like if this guy right here wanted to get up in melee with that spider and attack, you could use the movement on the turn to get in a little bit closer. You can use your movement to climb or swim if you need to, although those things do happen at penalties for most kinds of characters. So you wouldn't get your full 30 feet, you would get about 15 feet on those. You can use your movement to, if you have the ability to disengage from somebody, you can go in, do a thing, and then get back out. If you are, for example, if this guy's over here and he has a spell that's a 30-foot spell, there's no way he can hit that spider from there. But if he just, pops forward a little bit, a couple of squares, he can cast that spell without getting too close to the spider, but close enough to hit the spell. That's basically what your movement will do. The next thing that you can do on your turn is take an action. Now, an action is, it's basically what it sounds like. Any random thing that you can think of to do in a fight, you can do. Most of the time an action will be to either cast a spell, or to stab something with your weapon, or to use an object, for example, a healing potion, or a wand that shoots lightning bolts, or whatever thing that it is. You can use your actions to do that type of thing in a battle, and you get one of those in a turn. By default, you get one. There are a lot of different things you can use as an action, and I'm not going to go into great detail about them because there's so many, and that just delves into the complicated. But the basic principle of it is you can do a thing on your turn in a battle. And the same as the movement, you always get an action unless there's some kind of condition imposed on you by whatever the circumstance is. And that condition will always tell you how it affects your ability to do things. The next thing that you can do on your turn is a bonus action. Now, for a bonus action, you don't always automatically get a bonus action. Not everybody has bonus action things they can do. You have to have either a trait or a spell or an object that uses a bonus action in order to actually have a bonus action to use on your turn. But if you do have those things, a bonus action is basically something that it doesn't take a lot of time. It doesn't take the whole 6 seconds of a turn to be able to do the thing. You just kind of snap your fingers and do it on top of whatever else you're doing. A really good example of that is with a barbarian. When you're playing a barbarian, you get a thing called Rage, which gives you bonuses when you're fighting. And it takes 1 bonus action to go into a rage. So if you are charging in toward a person that you're attacking, and you're wielding your weapon, you can bonus action go into a rage just as you're charging in. And then by the time you get to your action on your turn with your weapon attack or whatever you have chosen to do, then you're already in a rage because the bonus action is just sort of an instant thing. There are a couple of bonus action spells, not a whole lot of them, but a few. And there are a couple of bonus action traits and features of different classes and species that you can do. All of that stuff will be written down on your character sheet. So if you have something that you can do as a bonus action, your character sheet will tell you what that thing is and how it works. Now, the last thing that I wanted to mention is a reaction. Now, reactions are a little more complicated because not everybody can do them, and they don't happen on your turn. They happen in the same round as your turn, but not while it's your turn. A reaction is essentially, it's what it sounds like. It's, for example, if somebody is running past you and you just sort of gut instinct throw your arm out to clothesline them, that's a reaction movement. And you can do that in D&D. The 2 most common kinds of reactions that you can use are attacks of opportunity and traits from your class that you can use to do things. So an attack of opportunity is something anybody can do. It's basically when you are in, for example, this spider's here and this person is here. They are in melee range with each other, or, close combat range. If this person has 1 hit point left and wants to peace out of there, if they start running, they're kind of distracted, they're trying to get away, and the spider will have an opportunity as the person's running away to just kind of swipe out at them one last time, trying to hit them, trying to, finish them off before they get away. And everybody in a game has the ability to do that, although it is limited to physical melee attacks, unless you have particular features that allow you to do otherwise. Another way to provoke an attack of opportunity is, let's say this person's here and the spider's here, and the person wants to be over here. They could go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 and go right past the spider, but they're going right past the spider. They have entered the spider's melee range and then exited it again. So the spider can do exactly what we said earlier and throw a leg out to try to clothesline them, or throw a pincher out to try to bite them, just on the way past. And that kind of attack works just like pretty much every other attack in a D&D battle. The way that you would avoid an attack of opportunity like that is by just not going into their range at all. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So you've got that buffer space and you're able to get around them without actually getting clotheslined by them. Reactions or the attack of opportunity is one reaction that pretty much everybody can do. It's one of the only ones that is that common. All of the other kinds of reactions either involve casting a spell or using a trait from your class. Rogues, for example, have a trait that's called Uncanny Dodge, which means that if somebody attacks them and succeeds at their attack roll, they roll their damage and see what the damage is, and the rogue can use their 1 reaction per turn to only take half of that damage. So they kind of matrixed out of the way just enough to not take the full brunt of the blow. A really good example of a spell that uses a reaction is Shield. Shield gives you +5 to your AC. So say you have an AC of 15 and somebody rolls a 17 to hit you. You can use your 1 reaction per round to throw up Shield as a spell. It uses a first level spell slot and it increases your AC to 20, so the 17 will then miss. And that shield will stay up until the end of your next turn. So anybody that hits you within that turn is just hitting a magical force field that's suddenly there in between you and the attackers. And that is the basics of how D&D combat works. There's a lot of stuff that's involved within each of those 4 steps. You can get complicated things happening with your movement. You can get complicated things happening with your action. Deciding whether something's a bonus action or an action is very involved. But when you boil it down to the absolute basics, it's just this that we've talked about right here.